Hello and welcome back to linuxjobber.com, where we teach you about Linux jobs and we help you get Linux jobs. My own name is Shonme Joseph and my email is showpopulous@gmail.com. So if you ever get to need any help doing Linux stuff, just send me an email and I will be prepared to help you out. Now for today, we'll go to our website and we will be looking at establishing network and network services. So now there are two parts to networking that, as we explain it on this website. The first one is the big picture stuff, which is just general overview of how computer networking works. Then the second part, the second link, is pretty much the commands that we use for networking and testing things out. So the second part is the actual work, and the first part is just understanding how computer networking works in general. So when you go to our website, www.linuxjobber.com, and you'll see both of them there. I have clicked on it. And all right, so I will get started here, and I'll start by I'll start by letting you know what is computer networking. When we say computer networking, what are we talking about? Computer networking is simply you have a computer. Let's just call this. Let's just imagine this is a laptop. This is one computer, and this computer then needs to talk to another computer. That's what computer networking is. One computer needs to talk to another computer. So here's one computer. I'm going to draw another computer here. That's going to look more like a tower server. So let's say this is a server and the other one is a client. So this is pretty much there are two computers here, and one of them needs to talk to the other one. So this client here needs to talk to the server, or maybe the other way around, the server needs to talk to the client. That's networking. It's that simple. Computer networking is not that complicated. It's just one computer talking to the next one. Now, the only time computer networking gets complicated is when we start to introduce different things in the middle of the equation to make the communication easier. So let's say, for instance, here we have a networking gear here, like a router or a switch. That's when computer networking gets complicated a little bit. So the client will then send information to the router, and then the router or the switch will then send that information to the server. That's when it gets a little complicated. But otherwise, it's just simply the client trying to talk to another client or a server. That's computer networking. It's that simple. Now, let's explain this in details to understand how it all works. So very simply, I will start with the client that we have over here, trying to connect to the server that we have over here. So imagine that we have we have the IP address of our client to be equal to 192.168.12.2. And then this is Google. Let's imagine that this is Google, and Google's IP address is 68.0. I'm just using this as an example. 68.0.2.4. So I'm just saying, let's just say, for example, this is google.com, and this is our IP address, and this IP address needs to remember and talk to google.com. Now, the problem is this: we human beings don't like to remember that IP address 68.0.2.4. We're very lazy. So instead, we'd like to remember a name such as google.com. When you say google.com, the computer knows which machine to go to. But when you say all this IP address, even though the computer knows it, we human beings don't want to remember that. So how do we solve this problem? How do we still get work done without actually confusing ourselves, without actually remember the things that we don't like to remember as human beings? So what we do, what happens in these cases is that you want to talk to google.com. When you want to talk to google.com, you type in google.com in your URL. Google.com is what you type here. You don't type 68.0.2.4. Not that you cannot, but in general, we human beings just don't do that. So what do? We type in google.com. Google.com, when we type it in, this computer here, let's just call this computer client A. This computer has no idea what google.com is initially, but it needs to send information to google.com. What happens? How does it get to know what it needs? Now, here's where a third party comes in. There's something that either the router or your ISP or somebody in the middle does. It's an engine, it's called DNS. Domain Name Service, DNS. All this is it's a mapping between this IP address and the name. So a DNS server will then remember that 68.0.2.4 equal to google.com. That's what a DNS does. It will remember this thing, and it makes our lives easier. All it is think of it like you have a phone in your pocket. You don't remember all of your friends' phone numbers, but you do have their their phone numbers stored in your phone. So all you just have to do is type in your friend's name into your phone, and the number would automatically come up. Nobody wants to remember all of their friends' phone numbers, correct? So instead, we store the number, and the phone will do the translation for us. So when we type in a person's name, the computer will automatically translate the IP address. Same thing happens here. When you type in google.com into your URL right here, and you send it out, when the computer does not know what to do with this. So the first thing that happens is that the computer sends that google.com to the translator here, and the translator is called a DNS. The translator then in turn sends back 68.0.2.4 to the computer. Now the computer knows which computer or which server to send the information to. In this case, the computer will send that 68.0.2.4 to this router, who will in turn send the information to google.com. And even if it is within your home network, if we're talking about home network, so if this was computer A over here and this was computer B over here, if computer A wants to talk to computer B, the same thing happens. You have a router in between or a switch in between. Information goes from computer A into the router or the switch, and then into computer B. In some other cases, if the two computers are connected to themselves directly, then computer A will just send its information directly to computer B. Now, this is very rare. This doesn't generally happen. What generally happens is it goes through some kind of gear, networking gear, in the middle. That is all what networking is about. And this is how DNS comes into play. All it does for you is does the translation. Now, in some cases, listen to this, there's no network administrator that does not understand networking. You cannot be a networking administrator if you don't understand networking. So let's take this very seriously. Now, you have to understand how DNS works, which is what we've just done. So now, once we have understood how DNS works, in some cases, there's no DNS in between. So between your computer and another computer, there might not be a DNS in between. But every computer has a file inside of it. Now let me use gray. In fact, I can use black for a computer. Every computer has a file inside of it, whether you're running Windows or you're running Linux. There's a file inside your computer that's called etc host. So it's called a host file. So I'm going to write it here, host file. In Linux, it's in etc host. In Windows, it's in like Win32, like Windows System 32 drivers, etc host, somewhere in there, if I remember correctly. This file now will keep that 68.0.2.4 equal to google.com, and every computer will have one. Now, as you can imagine, this is very cumbersome, and nobody likes to manually put this file in the machine and store all of this locally. So what happens is that we all prefer to use the DNS because it makes our lives easier. We don't have to manually manage the DNS. The router in between, or your ISP, or somebody else carries that headache of managing the translation between 68.0.2.4 to google.com inside the DNS, and we don't manage that, and they do all the work for us, and that's why we like to use DNS. But if DNS was not available to you, you can actually use the etc host inside the computer to do the translation for you. That way, all you have to do is type in google.com, and this etc host file will just do the translation for you, and you don't have to remember 68.0.2.4 all the time. Otherwise, you would have to just type in the same 68.0.2.4 into your URL bar right here, and it will automatically know which machine to go to. But because we are lazy and we don't want to remember that, what we will do is that we will simply just do the translation inside the etc host file, save it inside the computer, and the computer now knows how to do the translation for us. Now, to be sure that you understand the concept, if I do not have a DNS, so let's say for instance I take out this DNS here. If I do not have a DNS to do the translation, and I was trying to reach a machine called www.yahoo.com, what would happen when I try to reach this machine called www.yahoo.com? Now, if you don't have the answer, I can simply just tell you the answer. This is yahoo.com right here. If I type in yahoo.com into this URL bar and I don't have a DNS, obviously, if I don't have the translation here, the computer does not have the IP address to go to, meaning your computer A does not know who yahoo.com is. So it will not be able to translate it. It will not know which machine to go to. We're pretty much just going to say, go to yahoo.com. So this is yahoo.com right here. So I'm pretty much saying, please go to yahoo.com. Then the computer is going to ask me, well, who's going to tell me the IP address of yahoo.com? Then we're going to say, go to the DNS, go and ask that question. But when the computer tries to reach the DNS, it will find out that DNS does not exist. Now here's the problem. Then the computer is going to look inside this etc host file, and it's going to say, okay, I'm looking for yahoo.com. What is it equal to? What is the IP address? And it's not going to know the IP address. What happens in that case? Then the computer is not going to be able to reach yahoo.com. It's going to come back to you and say unresolved name yahoo.com. And I'm sure many people have seen that before. Unresolved name yahoo.com. That's what happens. So to fix that problem, what we really have to do is to put a DNS in between, or simply just store the IP address of yahoo.com inside this etc host file. So say yahoo.com equal to 69.5.4.99, which is probably the IP address of yahoo.com. And now the computer knows how to find yahoo.com if it needs to. So when you type in yahoo.com into your URL bar, what happens is that, let me use light blue to represent yahoo.com so you can see it. So when you type in yahoo.com into your URL bar right here, what happens is that the IP, first of all, the computer checks the etc host file, and now it knows the IP address of the machine that it's meant to go to, and that's 69 dot whatever we want, .0.4.99, and then it will send that IP address 69.0.4.99 to the router. It says, send me this, go to this machine for me, and then that router that's in the middle is going to take that information and send it to the correct IP address right here. So that's how the basics in general. It's a brief overview of computer networking. Now in the next video we will talk about how all of these things are used. We will test them out, and to get to that video, all you just have to do is go to the next, click on the next link right here. So we did number 1. You just have to click on number 2, and it will explain everything in details and use the commands, the Linux commands, so you can see it. Again, in this case, we're explaining establishing network and network services in Linux. So thank you for watching this video. If you do have any questions, again, please send it to showpopulous@gmail.com. My own name is Showunmi Joseph at linuxjobber.com, where we prepare you for Linux jobs. Let us know what questions you have, and we'll be glad to help you out. Thank you, and have a nice day.